What's up guys, this is Masi. Welcome to another video. In this video I want to show you how to deal with trigonometric limits. And the two important trigonometric limits are limits of sine theta over theta when tan theta approaches 0 is 1. And the second one is limit of 1 minus cosine theta over theta when tan theta approaches 0 is going to be 0. So based on these two, I'm going to give you some examples. The first example is says limit of sine 9x over x when x approaches 0. How to deal with this? We're going to say that limit of sine 9x over x when x is approaches 0. You multiply both numerator and denominator by 9. So it's going to be limit of sine 9x over 9x times 9 when x is approaching 0. This part is going to be 1 times 9 is going to be 9. Next one is going to be limit of sine 4x over 4x when x is approaching 0. In this case, what we can say let 4x be h, and then when x is approaching 0, it means that h is approaching 0. So that means we have limit of sine h over h when h is approaching 0. And as you know here, that's gonna go to 1. Next example, it says limit of sine x over 5x when x is approaching 0. What we need to do here? We're gonna say limit of sine x over x, and then you have 1 over 5 out when x is approaching 0 is going to be equal to 1 over 5. Next one, limit of x over sine 3x when x is approaching pi over 6. So in this case, it's going to be pi over 6, and here sine 3 times pi over 6, which is going to be sine over pi over 2. That's going to be 1, so pi over 6 over 1 is going to be pi over 6. Next one is limit of sine 7h over sine 3h when h is approaching 0. What we need to do here, we multiply both numerator and denominator by 7 over 7 and 3 over 3, which is going to make it as sine 7h over 3h over 7h 3h over sine 3h, and then you end up having 7h over 3h when h is approaching 0. It is going to be 1 times 1 times 7 over 3. So the answer is going to be 7 over 3. Next example is limit of tan 4x over 9x when x is approaching 0. How to deal with this one? It's going to be limit of tan 4x over 9x. We just multiply and divide it by 4x. Then I will write it as 1 over 9x, 4x over 4x, and instead of tan 4x, I'm going to write sine 4x over cosine 4x when x is approaching 0. Then these cancels out, so you're going to write it as sine 4x over 4x, 4 over 9, 1 over cosine 4x, and x is approaching 0. Sine 4x divided by 4x is going to be 1. Cosine 4x when x is approaching 0 is going to be 1 as well. So the answer is going to be just 4 over 9. Next one is limit of x times cosecant 25x when x is approaching 0. How to deal with this one? Well, what we can do, we can say limit of x over sine 25x. Then we multiply both numerator and denominator by 25. It's going to be limit of 25x over sine 25x, 1 over 25 when x is approaching 0. That's going to be 1 times 1 over 25. That's going to be the answer. Next example is going to be limit of tan 4x, x times secant x when x is approaching 0. That's going to be limit of sine 4x over cosine 4x, x times 1 over cosine 4x. This cancels out. Is going to be limit of sine 4x over x when x is approaching 0. And then what we need to do, we multiply numerator and denominator by 4. Then it's going to be sine 4x over 4x times 4. When x is approaching 0, it's going to be equal to 4. Next one is going to be limits of sine 2x times sine 3x over x squared when x is approaching 0. That's going to be limits of sine 2x over x times sine 3x over x when x is approaching 0 is going to be 2 times 3, and the answer is going to be 6. Next example, it says limit of sine x over 3 over sine x when x is approaching 0. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna multiply both numerator and denominator by x over 3, x over 3, and then x and x, which is gonna make it as sine x over 3 over x over 3 times x over sine x, x over 3, and x is approaching 0. That's gonna make it 1, 1, and here this x's cancels out. It's gonna be equal to 1 over 3. Next one. Limit of sine negative 3x over sine 4x when x is approaching 0. We know sine functions are odd functions. You can change it to negative sine 3x over sine 4x, limit x approaching 0, and then what you can do, you can multiply both sides by 3 over x, 4x over 4x, which it turns out to be sine 3x over 3x, 4x over sine 4x, and 3x over 4x when x is approaching 0. That's going to make it negative 3 over 4 because we have a negative sign there. Next example is limit of tan 4x over tan 7x when x is approaching 0. So you can say that sine 4x over cosine 4x sine 7x over cosine 7x when x is approaching 0. Cosine 4x and cosine 7x is going to be 1, so it's going to end up sine 4x over sine 7x. Then what we need to do, we're going to multiply both numerator and denominator by 4x and also 7x. That is going to change it to sine 4x over 4x, 7x over sine 7x, and we have 4x over 7x, which is going to make it as 1, 1, and 4 over 7. Next one is going to be limit of cosecant 8x over cosecant 4x when x is approaching 0. That's going to be a limit of 1 over sine 8x, 1 over sine 4x when x is approaching 0, which is going to be limit of sine 4x over sine 8x when x is approaching 0. Then it will be sine 4x sine hx times 8x over 8x 4x over 4x when x is approaching 0, which will be sine 4x over 4x 8x over sine 8x 4x over 8x when x is approaching 0. That's going to make it as 1 over 2. Next example, we have limit of sine 5x times sine 3x over sine 2x times sine 3x when x is approaching 0. So what we need to do here, first of all, sine 3x and sine 3x cancels out, is going to be limit of sine 5x over sine 2x when x is approaching 0. You multiply it by 2x over 2x, 5x over 5x. Then it's going to change to sine 5x over 5x, 2x over sine 2x, 5x over 2x is gonna be 5 over 2. Then next one is gonna be limit of sine 3x times sine 2x over x times sine 5x when x is approaching 0. That's going to be limit of sine 3x over x sine 2x over 5x. In this case, we multiply it by 3 over 3, 5 and 2x over 2x. Then it will be limit of sine 3x over 3x 1 over 3, 2 over 5 and sine 2x over 2x when x is approaching 0. This one is going to be 1, this one is going to be 1, and you have 2 over 15. Next one is limit of 1 minus cosine 2h over h when h is approaching 0. You multiply it by 2 over 2 is going to be limit of 1 minus cosine 2h over 2h times 2 when h is approaching 0. That's going to be 2 times 0, which is going to be 0. Next one is limit of sine 2x times 1 minus cosine x over, that's 1 minus cosine x squared when x is approaching 0. You can separate them and write it as sine 2x over x times 1 minus cosine x over x when x is approaching 0. Then you can multiply both sides by 2. It's going to change to sine 2x over 2x times 1 minus cosine x over x times 2 when x is 0. The answer is going to be equal to 2 because this one is 1, this one is 1, and this one is 1, this one is 0, and times 2 is going to make it 0. Next one is going to be limit of 1 minus cosine 2x sine squared 3x when x is approaching 0. The answer is going to be limit of 1 minus cosine 2x sine 3x times 1 over sine 3x times 3x over 3x 3x, and then you can multiply by 2x over 2x when x is approaching 0. That's going to make it as 1 minus cosine 2x over 2x times 3x over sine 3x to the power of 2, and you have 9x squared in here and 2x in here. And now what we have here, this one is going to be 0, this one is going to be 1, and this one is going to, since it goes to 0, it's going to be going to infinity. So since it is 0 times infinity, we need to do something else. We know 1 minus cosine 2x equals to 2 sine squared x. Why? Because cosine 2x is 1 minus 2 sine squared x. So we can say that limit of 1 minus cosine 2x is going to be 2 sine squared x over sine 3x to the power of 2. When x is approaching 0, it is going to be 2 times sine x over x to the power of 2 times 3x over sine 3x to the power of 2. Then the answer is going to be, we need to just write 1 over 9 here as well, so it's going to be 2 over 9. Next one is going to be limits of cosine 2 theta minus cosine theta over theta when theta is approaching 0. What we need to say, we can say limits of, I'm going to write it as cosine 2 theta minus 1 minus, actually plus 1 minus cosine theta. So we actually add and subtract 1 in here when theta is approaching 0. What we can do, we can say that's going to be limits of cosine 2 theta minus 1 over theta plus limits of 1 minus cosine theta over theta when theta is approaching 0. That's going to be when you multiply both numerator and denominator by -2, it is going to be limit of -2 over -2 cosine 2 theta minus 1 over theta plus limit of 1 minus cosine theta over theta. That will be limit of 1 minus cosine 2 theta over 2 theta times -2 plus limit of 1 minus cosine theta over theta when theta is approaching 0. So this one is going to be -2 times 0, which is going to be 0, and this is going to be 0. 0 plus 0 is going to be 0. And the last one, it says limits of 1 minus cosine 3 theta over theta when theta is approaching pi over 2. So we can say that 1 minus cosine 3 theta over theta when theta is approaching pi over 2, which is going to be 1 minus cosine 3 pi over 2 over pi over 2, which is going to be 1 minus 0 over pi over 2 is going to be 2 over pi. So that's the final answer. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to subscribe this channel. You can have access to many other videos regarding limits, differentiation, integration, and other topics in math, chemistry, and physics. Thank you for watching and have a great day.